The Los Angeles sun, a ruthless, indifferent eye in the sky, beat down on Carlos. It was another Tuesday, or maybe Wednesday, or maybe just another indistinguishable day in the purgatory of aspiring actors. The heat shimmered off the cracked asphalt of the parking lot outside the diner where he'd just bombed another audition. Not just bombed, he'd imploded. His lines had tangled in his throat like old fishing wire, his hands had sweated, and the casting director, a woman with eyes like chips of ice, had barely looked up from her notes. Carlos was 23, with a face that had been called expressive and earnest, adjectives that sounded suspiciously like not quite handsome enough for leading roles. He'd come to LA 3 years ago, a fresh-faced kid from Ohio, clutching dreams of silver screens and roaring applause. Now those dreams felt like old, crumpled movie posters, fading and forgotten in the harsh California light. He worked at a coffee shop, pulling shots of espresso for people who looked like they'd just stepped off a magazine cover, people who probably were on magazine covers. His apartment in Silver Lake was a shoebox, perpetually smelling of stale ramen and unfulfilled ambition. He kicked a loose pebble, sending it skittering across the lot. The air was thick with the scent of exhaust, jasmine, and something else, a faint, almost metallic tang that always seemed to hang in the LA air, like the ghost of a million broken dreams. His bank account was a desert. He ate ramen for dinner, ramen for lunch, sometimes ramen for breakfast. The phone calls from his parents, always ending with, "Are you sure this is still working out, son?" felt like tiny, persistent needles in his heart. He was tired of the fluorescent hum of the coffee shop, tired of wiping down sticky counters, tired of seeing his reflection in the polished espresso machine, a ghost of the hopeful kid who'd arrived here. "Rough day, kid?" The voice was low, smooth, like expensive whiskey. Carlos stopped, turning. Standing by a sleek, impossibly black car that seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it, was a man. He wasn't old, not really, but there was an ageless quality to him, a stillness that felt both elegant and unsettling. He wore a dark, impeccably tailored suit that looked too heavy for the LA heat, yet he didn't seem to sweat. His eyes, behind dark, designer sunglasses, were impossible to read. His smile was a thin, almost imperceptible curve. "Something like that," Carlos mumbled, feeling a sudden, inexplicable chill despite the sun. The man chuckled, a soft, dry sound. "The dream, eh? It's a cruel mistress, this town. Takes your hope, chews it up, spits it out, leaves you hollow." Carlos just stared. How did this stranger know? "But," the man continued, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "what if there was a shortcut, a way to bypass the endless auditions, the soul-crushing rejections, a way to step right into the spotlight?" Carlos's heart gave a sudden, desperate lurch. He knew this feeling. It was the same feeling he got when he saw a lottery ticket, a fleeting, irrational surge of hope. But this felt different, darker, yet impossibly more real. "What are you talking about?" Carlos asked, his voice barely a whisper. The man removed his sunglasses. His eyes were startlingly blue, almost unnaturally so, like polished lapis lazuli. They held a depth that seemed to stretch into forever, and in that depth, Carlos thought he saw a flicker of something ancient, something hungry. "A proposition," the man said, his voice now a silken caress. "A deal. You want to be a star, Carlos? I can make you one. The biggest, the brightest. All you have to do is agree." Carlos's mind raced. This was crazy. This was a scam. This was his last chance. He thought of his parents, their quiet disappointment when he called home, the subtle hints that maybe it was time to come back to Ohio. He thought of the rent due next week, the endless cups of lukewarm coffee, the gnawing emptiness in his stomach. "What's the catch?" he asked, his voice hoarse. The man's smile widened, just a fraction, but it felt like a chasm opening. "Catch? My dear boy, there's always a price. But for you, for the fulfillment of your deepest desire, it's a small one. A mere formality, a signature, a promise." He produced a sleek, black pen from his inner jacket pocket, the metal glinting with an unnatural sheen. And then, from thin air, a single sheet of parchment appeared. It wasn't paper, it felt like something impossibly old, smoother than silk, yet strangely coarse, almost alive beneath his touch. It hummed faintly, a low, almost inaudible thrum against the buzzing of his own blood. There was no elaborate contract, no fine print, no legalese to parse. Just a single, stark line at the bottom, waiting for a name. His name. A cold dread, a premonition of irreversible doom, flickered in his gut. But it was quickly drowned out by the desperate, roaring hunger for success. "Think of it as a partnership," the man said, his blue eyes boring into Carlos. "I open the doors, you walk through them, and the world will know your name." Desperation, a cold, sharp blade, twisted in Carlos's gut. He was tired of struggling, tired of being invisible. He wanted it. He wanted it so badly it ached. His hand trembled as he took the pen. The parchment felt strangely warm, almost pulsing. He didn't read anything. There was nothing to read. He just saw the blank line, an invitation to a new life. He scrawled his name, Carlos Ramirez, the letters feeling strangely heavy, as if carved in stone. As the ink dried, the parchment glowed faintly for a moment, then faded. The man smiled, a genuine smile this time, and it was far more terrifying than his thin, unsettling smirk. "Excellent," he purred. "Welcome to the show, Carlos." And then he was gone. The black car, the man, the strange parchment, vanished as if they had never been there. Carlos stood alone in the parking lot, the sun beating down, the metallic tang in the air suddenly stronger. He felt lighter and colder. The next morning, his phone rang. It was his agent, a woman whose voice usually carried the faint scent of disappointment. But today, it was bright, almost manic.
"Carlos, you won't believe this! That indie film, The Quiet Room, they loved you! They want you for the lead!"
Carlos blinked, the words feeling like a dream. The Quiet Room? He'd auditioned for a bit part, a single line. Lead? But I barely read for it, he stammered, a strange cold feeling starting in his stomach. "Doesn't matter," she chirped, a little too loudly. "They saw something. Raw talent, they said. You start next week." And just like that, it began. The Quiet Room was a critical darling, a dark psychological thriller that swept the indie circuit. Carlos's performance was hailed as a revelation, but a strange, unsettling buzz followed him everywhere. He noticed people staring, not just with admiration, but with an almost predatory curiosity. His exhaustion, though exhilarating, felt like a constant drain, as if something was siphoning off his very life force. His face was everywhere, billboards, magazines, talk shows, but the Carlos he saw in those images felt increasingly like a stranger. His shoebox apartment was traded for a sprawling, minimalist mansion in the Hollywood Hills, complete with an infinity pool that seemed to spill into the city lights below. He had a personal assistant, a chef, a fleet of luxury cars. He was living the dream. The exact dream he'd scrawled his name for. But the dream had a funny taste. It started subtly, like a persistent itch you couldn't quite scratch. His old friends, the ones he'd struggled with, the ones who knew the real Carlos, started to drift away. Or maybe he pushed them. He was always busy, always on a set, always flying somewhere. Their calls became less frequent, then stopped. He didn't notice at first. He was too busy. Then came the dreams. Not nightmares, not exactly, but vivid, unsettling tableaus. He'd be on a set, but the cameras would be replaced by unblinking eyes, the crew by silent, shadowed figures. He'd be performing, but the lines would be gibberish, or worse, prophecies of something terrible. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, the vast emptiness of his mansion pressing in on him. He started to notice things about his roles. They were always dark. Always. He played villains, tortured souls, characters who committed unspeakable acts. His performances were lauded for their intensity, their unflinching realism. But sometimes, after a particularly grueling scene, he'd feel a strange echo, a lingering resonance of the character's darkness within himself. He'd look in the mirror, and the reflection that stared back wasn't quite his own. His eyes, once a warm brown, now seemed to flicker, sometimes startlingly blue, like polished lapis lazuli, cold and ancient, holding that same hungry depth he'd seen in the man in the parking lot. He'd blink, shake his head, and they'd be brown again, but the memory, the feeling of that alien gaze, lingered, a cold knot in his stomach. He started avoiding mirrors, catching glimpses of himself only by accident, each time bracing for the chilling transformation. He tried to shake it off. It was just method acting, right? Getting into character. But the feeling of detachment grew. He felt like he was watching his own life unfold from a distance, a performance he was giving for an unseen audience. The applause felt hollow, the accolades like so much dust. One evening, at a glittering Hollywood party, surrounded by people who adored him, he felt utterly, profoundly alone. He excused himself, seeking refuge in a quiet corner of the sprawling estate. He looked out over the city lights, a vast, sparkling tapestry, and then he saw it, a faint, almost imperceptible shimmer in the darkness, just at the edge of his vision. A black car, impossibly black. It was gone in an instant. He dismissed it, tiredness, stress. But the encounters grew less subtle. He'd be in his mansion late at night, reading a script, and he'd feel a sudden drop in temperature, a whisper of a breeze where there was none. He'd turn, and for a split second, he'd see a shadow, too tall, too thin, vanish around a corner. He'd hear a faint, dry chuckle that echoed the sound the man in the parking lot had made. His personal assistant, a cheerful, unflappable young woman named Maya, started looking at him strangely. He caught her watching him sometimes, a flicker of concern in her eyes. He snapped at her more often, his temper growing shorter, his patience thinner. He felt a constant low hum of irritation, a simmering rage just beneath his skin. The roles he was offered became even more disturbing. One script involved a character who slowly, meticulously tortured his victims. Carlos read it, his stomach churning, but a strange, compelling fascination pulled him in. He found himself agreeing, even though every fiber of his being screamed no. It was like his mouth was saying yes, while his mind was screaming. During the filming of that movie, things escalated. He found himself doing things on set that weren't in the script. Improvised moments of cruelty that shocked the crew but thrilled the director. He'd feel a strange, cold power surge through him, a sense of absolute control, and afterwards, a hollow ache. He tried to call his parents. The line was dead. He tried again. Still dead. He tried his old friends. Disconnected. It was as if his past life had been systematically erased. One night, he woke up to a distinct, chilling sensation of being watched. He sat bolt upright in bed, his heart hammering. The room was dark, but he felt a presence, a heavy, suffocating presence. And then he heard it, a low, guttural purr, not Simba's, but something deeper, colder, vibrating through the very foundations of his mansion. He scrambled out of bed, his hands shaking, fumbling for the light switch. The lights flickered, then came on. The room was empty, but on his pristine white duvet, there was a single, perfectly formed black feather. It wasn't from any bird he knew. It felt impossibly cold. He knew then the deal, the price. It wasn't just his soul, it was his very essence. He was becoming something else. He tried to fight it. He canceled auditions, fired his agent, told his assistant he was taking a break. He locked himself in his mansion, trying to reconnect with the Carlos he used to be. He looked at old photos, listened to music from his youth, but the old feelings wouldn't come. He felt like an empty vessel, a stage for a performance he no longer controlled. The phone rang. It was the studio head, his voice dripping with menace. "Carlos, you have a contract. You will be on set tomorrow, or there will be consequences." He tried to scream, but no sound came out. His throat felt constricted, as if an invisible hand was squeezing it. He looked at his reflection in the vast, polished window. His eyes were no longer his own. They were startlingly blue, like polished lapis lazuli, and they held that same ancient, hungry depth he'd seen in the man in the parking lot. His smile, when he tried to force one, was a thin, almost imperceptible curve. He was a star, all right, the biggest, the brightest. But the spotlight felt like a burning inferno, and the applause was the sound of his own damnation. He was Carlos Ramirez, the celebrated actor, but he was also the puppet, dancing on invisible strings, his every move dictated by the chilling, unseen presence that now resided within him. He walked to the edge of his infinity pool, looking out over the glittering city. It looked like a million tiny lights, each one a soul, perhaps, waiting to be extinguished. The metallic tang in the air was stronger than ever now, almost suffocating. He could hear the faint, dry chuckle, closer this time, right behind him. He turned. There was nothing there, but he felt the cold breath on his neck, a phantom touch that made his skin crawl, and he knew. The show was just beginning. And Carlos Ramirez, the boy from Ohio, was no longer the star. He was just another character in a play. He couldn't escape. A horror story written in the very fabric of Hollywood. And he was playing the part of the damned. He raised a hand slowly to his lips and felt a smile stretch across his face, wider than it should have been. A smile that wasn't his own. The applause, he realized, was for them, and he was just the stage, waiting for the curtain to rise on the next act of his eternal performance.